Tex, you are my best friend, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you.
Tex and Diane MacGyver.
She was very prominent in business.
He was a prominent civil lawyer, the heavy hitter in the Republican Party.
They were kind of a power couple.
Atlanta 911.
We need to have a unit respond to our ER.
The shooting happened inside of a car.
The gunshot entered the left portion of the back.
They did everything that they could to save her.
And she dies during surgery.
My initial reaction was like something isn't adding up, something doesn't make sense.
No, folks, this is either a story of a calculated murder or a terrible accident.
It boiled down to whether or not the gun could accidentally go off and the trajectory of the bullet.
Was handling the gun. I realized it was in my lap.
Your wife is in a emergency. She's under assignment.
This is what he's going to tell you. How to get out of that situation.
And I grabbed the gun.
Trying to find the first place to put a body.
No, sir.
The only thing they could do was kill him.
You want to say anything? We, the jury, need to find the defendant.
Atlanta 911 operator 3323. What is the address of your emergency?
Hey, Atlanta, this is Emory Police, Dispatch 46.
Okay.
We need to have a unit respond to our ER in reference to a gunshot victim. The gunshot entered the left portion of the back.
In the back. Okay. Shot to the left, shot in the back.
It came in as someone had been shot driving through the city. The shooting happened inside of a car, and so we didn't know who it was at first.
Oh, we've got exclusive new details tonight of the mysterious shooting.
As police investigate how a gun went off inside the vehicle.
And then it was just the next day that it came out that it had been Tex and Diane MacGyver.
He was a prominent civil lawyer at a large law firm. He was a heavy hitter in the Republican Party.
She was very prominent in business. They'd been married for 10 years, second marriage for both. They were kind of a power couple.
It was Diane MacGyver who had been shot.
And they pull into the emergency room. She is almost losing consciousness at this point. But she's awake enough to say to the doctor, it was an accident.
She probably did think it was an accident. She probably did think that there's no way that her husband would shoot her.
The MacGyvers were returning to Atlanta late on a Sunday night after a weekend at their horse ranch outside the city. Their friend Danny Jo Carter was driving.
Diane and I were talking, and I think Tex dozed off in the back. He was sitting behind her in the back seat.
Once in the city, they hit heavy traffic on the interstate.
And Diane said, well, just get off here. And he woke up and he said, girls, this is a bad area. I wish you hadn't gotten off here. And he said, darling, hand me my gun. It was right below the console in like a brown shopping bag. He wasn't really involved in the conversation. I just assumed that he had gone back to sleep. And then I heard this explosion. I didn't know if a car had hit us or something had exploded. And Diane's sitting right beside me, so she turns to me and she says, Tex, what did you do? And then she leaned forward and she turned around and she said, Tex, you shot me. And about that time, she started making noises like I've never heard before. They were gurgling, and then she lost consciousness.
They did everything that they could to save her. She did come in conscious. She was aware. She was awake when she was asked if she wanted to see Tex. And Diane said very clearly, no.
And she dies during surgery.
Danny Jo Carter was at the police station when she got the news.
I fell on the floor and I was crying. I couldn't wrap my head around anything other than it was a careless, stupid accident at that moment. I just couldn't imagine anything else.
The Corey Services Tower in downtown Atlanta is lit up with this memorial to the company's president, Diane MacGyver. She was shot inside a Ford Expedition she rode in late Sunday with her husband, Tex. Atlanta police have not yet completed their investigation, though they say they are fairly close. Sheriff Sills says Tex MacGyver, a prominent Atlanta attorney, is distraught and grief-stricken over the incident.
It appeared absolutely as if he was desperate to get his wife medical attention.
I know some of it's probably going to be difficult for you to answer, but take your time.
Police begin to investigate. He's interviewed within a few days, and he explains what happened.
I said, girls, where are we and what's happening? Correct. We went through an area I thought that was particularly dangerous at night. And I quickly said, this is a big mistake, and we're in a place that we don't belong. Right. And of course, here we are in an almost new SUV, and 2 women in the front seat. Right. And I said, I'd like to, if you don't mind, please hand me my gun. Right. Then I had wrapped my gun in the Publix grocery sack. Diane reaches in, pulls it out, hands it back to me, and by then we may have been on Piedmont. Anyway, I'm relatively satisfied that we're out of that kind of area. Right. And I guess I lay back again and went to sleep. Okay. This twilight zone kind of thing. Right. Had the weapon in my lap. Okay. And then we'll remember next happening. Danny Joe came to a stop, and anyway, I just time to wake up. But she came to a stop, and I was handling the gun. And I realized it was in my lap, right, and it went off. And Diane's head was kind of slanted. She said, I've been shot, words to that effect. Okay. And I immediately put my arms around her and tried to determine how bad it was. And then I made the judgment that Emory was the closest hospital. Okay.
Atlanta Police Department did a cursory investigation. The first question I asked when I heard about the case was, why didn't they go to Grady?
Grady Hospital is a level 1 trauma center where doctors regularly deal with gunshot wounds, and not far from where the incident happened.
Not even 5 minutes. I believe they passed 4 hospitals before they got to Emory. They had never gotten a gunshot wound at that hospital ever. My initial reaction was like, something isn't adding up, something doesn't make sense.
The detectives did not push MacGyver on why he chose to go to Emory.
They're a client of our firm, and they're a good bit. So.
It was a very cordial interview. He said it was an accident. They really kind of just took his word for it.
3 months after the shooting, Atlanta police charged MacGyver with involuntary manslaughter, about the least serious charge possible.
She could have received probation if he would have been convicted of it. So it was nowhere near as serious as a murder charge.
Tex MacGyver was able to make special arrangements to turn himself in using the back entrance of the jail. That back entrance is normally for official business only by police and sheriff's deputies, but that's so MacGyver could avoid letting the public see him turn himself in.
It goes to say how far wealth and prominence can get you in the criminal justice system.
But the Fulton County District Attorney's Office decided to launch its own investigation.
He is charged by the Atlanta Police Department with involuntary manslaughter that has absolutely nothing to do with the Fulton County DA's office is going to do.
With any case that we had at the DA's office, be it Tex MacGyver or any person that's not wealthy or prominent, we always did another investigation, always. It was just the way that our office was run. The issue was always to get justice for Diane.
Especially when prosecutors learned Diane had made a second secret will, cutting Tex out.
Video just in tonight as Tex MacGyver is released from the Fulton County Jail.
That's right. The Atlanta attorney accused of felony involuntary manslaughter posted bond this afternoon, but he says it's an accident.
But the district attorney's office wasn't so sure.
So we started talking to the witnesses. And I think the first thing was when Danny Joe told us that he asked her to change her story in the emergency room.
And he said, I hate to see you get wrapped up in this. And I thought to myself, I'm not wrapped up in anything. And he said, you just need to tell the police when they get here that you just came down here as a friend of the family's. I knew there were video cameras, and I said, Tex, I just drove you into the emergency room. And he said, well, they don't know that. And it took my breath away.
McIver knew the district attorney was investigating, and within days launched a legal and public relations campaign to show he was innocent.
Oh, we've got exclusive new details tonight of the mysterious shooting death of a Buckhead businesswoman at the hands of her husband.
Tex McIver tells 11 Alive's Valerie Hoff that he passed a polygraph test and his wife Diane's death was simply a horrible accident.
Nobody believes that it was intentional. The detective concluded it was an accident.
There were other efforts at spin as part of McIver's PR campaign. A spokesperson had blamed recent Black Lives Matter protests.
He was trying to explain why it was that he wanted a gun. And the events here occurred while there were protest movements dealing with Black Lives Matter.
They weren't there, they hadn't been there, and nothing had ever been said about that.
That was an aspect of the case that I thought was unfortunate, to try to bring a racial issue into the case when it had nothing to do with race.
It just kind of blew out of proportion. Rich white people, afraid of Black Lives Matter, kills his wife, bonfire of vanities.
And the PR consultant also told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that the gun went off when the vehicle hit a bump.
I was like, oh my gosh. We were sitting still at a traffic light. There was never a bump in the road. I just thought, why is he not telling the story? Why is he making up things? And so I had gotten an attorney, and that really upset him. So he called my husband and said, Danny Joe's going to put me in prison.
Charlie, it's Tex. Sir, let me just be plain. Danny is about to send me to prison. These are racist, this voice messages. They call me right away. Y'all have no idea. The problem, Mr. Collins, is innocent, but it's absolutely nuclear for me. Please call.
I wasn't saying that he murdered her. I was just telling him everything that happened. I didn't know what was going on in his mind.
Then we started investigating his finances and saw that he had a financial motive to harm Diane.
Prosecutors discovered that on the day Diane died, Tex, once worth millions, was about $5,000 in debt.
So he had been a really high-profile, high-powered attorney who was bringing in a lot of business. But as he got older and started to work less, he didn't have the client roster that he used to. He wasn't bringing in the billable hours that he used to. So they said he was in financial trouble. This guy needed money, and he had nowhere else to get it from.
She had said that she was done with Tex and he owed her money and he needed to pay it.
Within weeks of Diane's death, McIver organized a huge auction of all of her belongings.
Tex McIver is selling his late wife's collection of designer clothing and shoes. The sale is being billed as a fashionista's dream closet.
Everything from floor-length furs to $40,000 diamond earrings. They're expected to bring in as much as $2.5 million.
Once we started seeing how fast he was trying to get money, that's what led us to follow down the path of a financial motive.
And prosecutors learned that the McIver's sprawling ranch outside of Atlanta had become an issue with the couple.
It's a big Victorian house. It was about 85 acres. There was a lot of groomed property where the cows and the horses were in the pasture.
It is my pleasure to be the first to present to you Tex and Diane McIver.
When they got married, he gifted her 50% of the ranch, so they owned it 50-50.
She had lent Tex money for an addition that they had done to their ranch. And even that was to be paid back with interest. And if Tex missed a payment, she could foreclose on the ranch that they lived in together. So it was serious.
They had argued about who was going to get the ranch in case of their deaths.
Diane, who had no children, told Tex she wanted to leave the ranch to her godson, Austin.
The state came to believe that Diane had written a second will that had essentially cut Tex out, and that this was the financial motive.
Prosecutors got a warrant to search McIver's apartment for the will, but did not find it.
I think Tex destroyed it. I think he destroyed it.
And while they're going through the house, they look at all the dresser drawers, and there's a gun under the sock.
Fulton County prosecutors showed off the gun they say was found in Tex McIver's sock drawer last week.
And the condition of his bond was he's not allowed to possess a gun, so he gets locked up again. Now he's back in the Fulton County jail.
The very next day, things got even worse for Tex McIver.
A Fulton County grand jury has just indicted the prominent Atlanta attorney over a malice murder charge in the death of his wife, Diane.
Which is intentional homicide. You intended to kill her. It's a mandatory life sentence.
In addition to malice murder, he is also charged with 3 counts of trying to influence witnesses.
Do you understand the charges that have been brought against you, Mr. McIver, in this indictment?
I do. It's like, we're not going to let the rich white guy go. The rich white Republican prominent lawyer. We're not going to let him go because we tried people with lesser evidence than this.
No, folks, this is either a story of a calculated murder or a terrible accident, and it's the top story you have been following in Atlanta today.
It was in the headlines every day. Oh, my God.
His name is Tex McIver.
Tex McIver. Tex McIver.
Prominent attorney. He shot and killed his wife.
I mean, banner headlines, you know. Nothing was going on in Atlanta those days.
I mean, it was the case in Atlanta that everybody was talking about, and every time we went to court, the cameras were there.
Did you have any idea where this was going to go?
It was stressful. Some people thought that because he initially blamed Black Lives Matters, that we were trying to get him because he tried to blame black people just to get at Tex because he was wealthy and white. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense, and it's unethical as a prosecutor to do that.
Tex McIver had been moved out of the Fulton County Jail to a smaller, less crowded facility, and the district attorney complained in a pretrial hearing that McIver was getting special treatment.
That this defendant is dangerous. He is indicted for murder. He is indicted and he's formally charged with intimidating witnesses. And I believe that placing him in the Alpharetta jail gave him a greater opportunity to do that.
And the district attorney also claimed that McIver had made an effort to bribe him to drop the case through a mutual friend.
He basically said, you know, if this case goes away, you know, if they deal with my lawyers the way we need to, then, you know, it'll be a big bonus for Mr. Howard. And it was just so bold and audacious trying to cover his tracks and do whatever he thought was possible to get out of it.
Now opening statements are less than 24 hours away.
As the trial date neared, a new set of defense lawyers was brought in with the aim of trying to get past McIver's missteps.
There were, you know, many things that Tex did that I wish he had not done, but he did. I mean, if Tex is guilty of anything, it's, you know, frankly, being an idiot at points in time. There wasn't one thing ever that made me question his innocence, not one point in time.
And the new lawyers decided to focus on what they said was McIver's love and commitment to Diane in the 10 years they had been married.
The wedding was a reflection of that, and it was a reflection of Tex saying, whatever Diane wants, I want Diane to have. And Diane arriving in a horse-drawn carriage at the farm, wearing a very elaborate gown and headdress.
I, Tex, take you, Diane,
take you, Diane.
To be my wife.
To be my wife.
You are my best friend, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you.
It was elaborate. It was to the nines.
And Mrs. MacIver, may I ask you for the first dance?
I think it just encapsulated Tex and really Diane perfectly. Loved her too much to kill her.
But besides the motive, the key challenge for the defense remained the ballistics.
It boiled down to that, whether or not the gun could accidentally go off and the trajectory of the bullet.
The trigger pull was a 12-pound trigger pull, which is something that wouldn't, just a slight reflex wouldn't lead the trigger to be pulled.
We dropped the gun, beat the gun, test fired the gun. No matter how many times we did it, that gun never went off on accident.
I would say that's the most damaging evidence in the case. A 12-pound trigger pull is not the kind of thing that your finger by mistake pulls. You have to really intend to pull that trigger. You can't do it in your sleep.
But if the gun had been cocked in what's called single action mode, it would be a different story.
And once the hammer is cocked on that gun, it's almost like a hair trigger. I mean, it will go off with the lightest of touch. So that was the big question is, why would you keep a gun that was cocked and loaded in your car?
In his police interrogation, MacIver admitted he rarely used that gun.
Oh, I didn't discharge that gun in a couple of years.
I was kind of assumed that would be kind of idiotic to have a gun sitting in the console of the car in single action.
And prosecutors were not buying MacIver's description of how he held the gun low in his lap.
Have the weapon in my lap. Okay.
And the way that he held his hands when he said how he was holding the gun and then the gun just went off, if he was actually holding his hands like that, there's no way he could have shot her in the back. What he was saying didn't match the ballistics.
The prosecution's theory was that Tex could have had the gun back kind of low at the waist, pointed the way you would think you'd point a gun at somebody. And that's what they tried to show with their model. But the problem with that is the door is right here. The door constrained his arm, and there really wasn't a way for him to get his hand in that position with the door being there. It doesn't make any logical sense that you're going to try to kill somebody by shooting them in the car that's being driven by their very best friend through the back seat of a seat that has all this machinery and mechanics in it. It makes zero sense.
Jury selection begins in Tex MacIver's murder trial tomorrow morning.
And during the jury selection process, the defense team came to understand that the accidental firing theory was going to be a tough sell.
In the South, we have a lot of gun owners, and the minute you ask them about a revolver just going off accidentally, all of them are like, no, that's not believable. So, a lot of people got disqualified for that.
You are excused. You're free to go. You're done. Excused, excused.
The court is on the second panel of 48 jurors, and 27 of them stated there was no way they could be impartial.
Juror after juror after juror just said, I don't buy it. I can't believe that happened.
It's been a challenging process, but a jury has now been seated in the Tex MacIver murder trial.
A lot of people who loved Diane MacIver were there. There were fewer people there who supported Tex. He seemed really confused. He was kind of looking around the courtroom. He looked lost.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I am Felita Griffin.
The prosecution, though, straight out the gate, went for money. They went for greed.
Now, this is a case about maintaining an image of wealth and power that the defendant created for himself and the lengths that he went through to keep it. The MacIvers had the storybook life, but things weren't as they seemed. And on September 25th, 2016, the day that the defendant shot his wife in the back, his life was spinning out of control. He had become dependent upon Diane. On the time of her death, the defendant wouldn't even have $1. On Diane's death, he went from negative $5,000 to over $1.1 million cash instantly. The easiest way for him to gain control was to kill Diane. The evidence will show that that is just what he did. The only verdict that speaks the truth in this case is a verdict of guilty. Thank you.
Ms. Clark Palmer, you ready?
I am, thank you.
Okay.
We were very confident. We were very confident this would be an acquittal.
There's really one thing that you need to know about Tex McIver and Diane McIver to know that he did not intentionally choose life, and that is that he loved her. He truly loved her, deeply loved her, and she loved him back. One fact you are not going to have to decide is, did Tex shoot Diane? Yes, he did. That's not in dispute. The question you have to decide, was it intentional? And the evidence is going to show it was not. He did not intentionally kill her. He did not murder her, and he is not guilty. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you if you would please occupy this demonstrative aid where you would have been that night.
For the testimony of Danny Jo Carter, prosecutors created a mock-up of the interior of McIver's SUV that she drove that night.
And they just built it from scratch. I played Diane. Adam Abadi was in the back.
So,
the more the jury can see, I think it helps.
Prosecutor Clint Rucker pulled out the actual revolver with a trigger safety lock to have Carter show what happened.
then direct Ms. Griffin as though she were Diane McIver and tell her or show the jurors exactly what she did.
She looked in there, and as she was looking, Tex said, "It's in the bag." And so she just reached over and got it and handed it to him.
Can you tell the jurors when you actually stopped at a red light when you heard something?
Yes. I heard a big boom.
And so can you tell the jurors what happened next?
Diane turned around, like, she turned around this way. She swung around and she says, "Tex, what did you do?"
Tex, what did you do?
Mm-hmm.
And did he say anything?
He said the gun discharged. I would look at him occasionally, but I really didn't want to. It's like that person that was sitting out there is not anybody that I ever knew.
Question. Did you see anyone who appeared to be protesting anything out there?
No, I did not. My testimony did not go along with his story of the Black Lives Matter and the bump in the road.
Can you say to the jurors whether or not you hit a bump?
No, we did not.
But prosecutors thought her most important testimony was about what McIver asked her to do later at the hospital.
What did he say?
I know this doesn't look good.
What's the next thing he said?
I've seen how these things can go down.
Anything else?
You just need to say you came down here as a friend of the family.
So what did you say?
Okay, I leaned down and said, "Tex, I just drove you into the emergency room."
And then did he say something in response to that?
He looked at me and he says, "Well, they don't know that."
It was a long trial. There were a lot of witnesses called,
including the woman who handled bookkeeping and tax matters for Diane McIver.
She called me in her office and said, "I need you to make some copies of these papers." She said, "I cannot trust anyone else." So I proceeded to the copy room and I made the copies and I went back and handed them to her, and she says, "Thank you so much. This is my new will."
The bookkeeper said she never saw the will, but said it was designed to benefit Diane's godson, Austin.
Austin wasn't born when she did her initial will, so I just felt that she was making changes because she wanted to make sure he was in there.
But in the end, prosecutors were never able to find the will that they claimed cut Tex out.
That was a big concern. Was not finding that second will. Even though you don't have to have a motive in Georgia, it just always helps to have one.
If the gun is in single action, so with the hammer cocked.
The defense got another break when the prosecutor's gun expert testified.
The GBI analyst ended up giving us an absolute gem. When he was handling the gun on the stand, he himself unintentionally caused the trigger to go off.
The trigger.
He said, oops. That proved our point. It was absolutely easy for the gun to unintentionally be fired. It was one of those, Perry Mason moments that we all say don't actually happen in court. It happened in court.
Record, please state and spell your name.
David Rye.
The highlight of the defense case was an expert witness and a new theory about REM sleep disorders and what was called confusional arousal.
Did you ultimately make a diagnosis about Mr. MacGyver?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what was your diagnosis?
REM sleep behavior disorder.
And their contention was that Tex had fallen asleep, this sleep disorder kicked in, and he flailed his arm, and that's how the trigger was pulled.
Is that consistent or inconsistent with the confusional arousal?
I think it's one explanation. It's consistent.
Okay.
It was an accident. What could be simpler?
Mr. MacGyver, you understand that you have a right to testify, and that if you wish to testify, no one can prevent you from doing so. Okay. Do you choose to testify in your trial? No.
There were too many things that, he didn't have a great answer for. Why take the risk?
In this case, we know by way of the evidence that this is not an accident. This is not a malfunctioning gun that just went off. In this case, we know that the defendant was under pretty extreme financial stress, that he was living up here and earning down here. And he wasn't willing to make a change to that lifestyle. And we are confident that the evidence in this case has proved that the defendant is guilty of every count in this indictment beyond a reasonable doubt. Thank you.
Mr. Samuel, after your honor.
We had so much to talk about in the closing arguments.
There were a must. Okay? You can poo-poo that. You can say that's ridiculous. You can say whatever you want to say, but there is no doubt about it. They were like little teenagers in love. And yet the prosecution wants you to just ignore all that and say, nevertheless, 10 o'clock, Sunday night, September 25th, I'm going to kill her. It's the woman I love. If you're trying to kill your wife for motive, and it's a financial motive, okay, what happens if you don't succeed? What happens if the bullet strikes her and incapacitates her for once? Then you got medical bills for the rest of your life and no income. It makes no sense. It makes no sense that this is the way you would intentionally and calculatedly plan a murder. It is not a crime if all that is proved is that Tex McGyver told Dan and Joe Carter to lie. If that's what you find, and that's all you find, not guilty.
Gentlemen, it is now time for what we call the state's rebuttal, part 2 of the state's closing.
Who will stand for Diane MacGyver? She knew betrayal, hurt, and pain. He was just coveting her money again and again. Who will stand for Diane MacGyver? A great woman she tried to be. Who will stand for truth and justice? truth and justice. As she cries out, who will stand for me?
The jury was out more than 4 days. They wanted to see the gun. They wanted to handle the gun. At the end of 4 days, they told us that they could not reach a verdict. And the judge gave them, what we call an Allen charge or a dynamite charge.
In a moment, you will return to the jury room for as much time as you need to examine your differences in a spirit of fairness and candor, and to try again to arrive at a verdict.
And sure enough, 2 hours later, we got the verdict.
The courtroom was packed. It was being broadcast live. We were all sitting there, not really knowing what was about to happen.
In addition to the 3 counts of trying to influence witnesses, the most important decision for the jury was to choose between malice murder, felony murder, or not guilty.
Malice murder is an intentional killing. You killed somebody, you intended to kill them. Felony murder is where somebody died. Even if you didn't intend to kill somebody, you can be found guilty of felony murder.
Welcome back. My understanding is that you all have reached a verdict. I would like you please to publish the verdict, which means read the verdict into the record.
On count 1, murder, we find the defendant not guilty.
You hear the jury say not guilty on malice murder, and you're thinking, okay, we're in good shape. And we thought, okay, if you're not guilty on malice murder, we ought to be okay on everything else. This meant the jury was telling us they didn't think that he intended to kill her.
On count 2, felony murder, we find the defendant guilty of felony murder. On count 3, we find the defendant guilty. On count 4, we find the defendant guilty. On count 5, guilty.
I think Tex was in shock. It was gut-wrenching.
Today is the day we are going to work through the sentencing for Mr. MacGyver.
We would ask the court to allow just a few victim impact statements in this case.
Tex MacGyver lied to me and tried to get me to lie. His friends tried to intimidate me and insult me. She was smart, beautiful, challenging, loving, and fun. And in the words of Mr. Clint Rucker, I stand for Diane.
Good luck.
Thank you.
So I think that Mr. MacGyver would like to address the court now.
He stood up and gave one of the most bizarre speeches I have ever heard.
I have a list that I won't bore the court with of about 60 individuals locally that have been very helpful to me in terms of their support. Neighbors bringing me food while I was in house arrest, friends delivering Chick-fil-A, one of my huge favorites, and one of the things I just won't forget.
He talked about how much he loved Chick-fil-A, I think, and how he was gonna miss that. Nonsensical, I guess is the best word to say.
Since this tragedy, I have spent 263 nights in a jail cell by myself, but not alone. He has joined me there. It's present, hard to cry, but she has left her earth suit, and she feels as if she's on the other side of the curtain or in another dimension.
And nobody really knew what he was getting at, so it was very, very strange.
I know she's here. I feel present. Darling, you have brought me more joy and fulfillment than few men on this earth have ever known. Thank you, and until we are together again, because it is truly real. It is truly real. Thank you.
The jury concluded
that you, Mr. MacGyver, intentionally pulled the trigger of that firearm. And there really isn't a form of punishment that any judge could impose that would be more severe than the burden of knowing that you took Diane MacGyver from all of us. I'll tell you what's most telling. You had as much time as you wanted to share with me what you thought was important for me to hear, and I guess your audience to hear. We heard about Chick-fil-A and telepathy. I didn't ever hear you say you're sorry for what you did. To me, that silence speaks volumes. The penalty for felony murder is life with the possibility of parole. Ms. Clark-Palmer, any objection to the sentence as imposed? Okay, thank you.
He was stooped over. It looked like he was just going to disappear, right to prison.
I said that we would stick with him. We would file a motion for new trial with the judge, that we would appeal to the Georgia Supreme Court, and we would keep fighting and try to reverse this injustice.
High-profile murder conviction is overturned. The Georgia Supreme Court has reversed the ruling for Tex MacGyver.
In a really scathing opinion, said that Tex MacGyver deserves a second trial.
They said the evidence of motive was, in the words of the Supreme Court, thin and weak. The judge should never have allowed in the evidence about a second will. It was just nonsense. And the judge shouldn't have allowed in evidence about which hospital is better. The Supreme Court doesn't often reverse convictions, based on the weakness of the evidence. So, it was just amazing.
The prosecution said it was prepared to retry the case, but then offered MacGyver a plea deal.
So we accepted an 8-year sentence because he'd already done 6.5.
He did have to admit to it, but he didn't have to admit to murder, so.
She died as a result of my actions, plain and simple. I've stood up to that over and over again. I can't remember a day I didn't cry for the first 2 years I was at the prison.
Hey, he's broken. When you spend 8 years in the Georgia State prison system, you're a different person.
He doesn't deserve to be free. He definitely doesn't deserve her money.
And in accepting the guilty plea deal, the judge told MacGyver he was hardly an innocent man.
I think we'll all go to our graves debating how much of the malevolent intent there was. There was clearly the recklessness. And Mr. MacGyver, it's certainly not my call as to whether you ever see your angel again. You have much more work to do righting the wrong that you committed.